No. Let's try that again. And no, we don't want that one. We want that one. That work this time?
Yes.
Yay. Okay, second time lucky. So as you know, most of you know anyway, the reason that we started these webinars was because we were supposed to have a conference in 2020 in May called the We Can Reason Conference, but it has had to be postponed several times, and now we're rescheduling it for May 14th, 2022. Mark your calendars. Hopefully this time you won't have to erase it. And for the, come on, all right, so it's not working, hang on, here we go. So instead, what we're doing this year on May 15th is we're going to have a We Can Reason Skeptic Camp. I hope you can all join us. It's going to be from 10 till 4 Mountain Time. It's going to be online. It's going to be a fun day where we just have 20-minute talks and 10 minutes Q&A, 9 speakers, and a little fun quiz to start the day off. Hopefully everybody here can join us. It's really awesome. Hopefully it's our first one ever. I've actually spoken at 2, so they were really fun. And hope that you guys enjoy them as much as I have. Just a little disclaimer to make sure that we all are careful about how we ask questions, etc. This group has been amazing. In fact, we had Tom Rastrelli here last week doing for book club, and he commented on what a great group we are. So let's keep our good behavior going. We have been, everybody seems to really enjoy speaking for us. So the next thing is please donate any amount you can. I will put the link in the chat, and I will do so several times if I remember to through the night. And if I forget, maybe Lois or Roy or somebody can remind me, because, you know, I have one of those brains that keeps going all over the place. The next thing you can do is also go to the webpage. There's a donate button there. And you can also become a member at our website, which is atheistcalgary.com. And lastly, during the Q&A, after Josh has a chance to speak, please post the questions in the chat. You can direct them directly to me or to the whole group. It's your choice. I will read them out so those listening via the stream will know the questions, and then Josh will be able to answer. And it keeps things orderly, especially with so many people. It's too easy to talk over one another. So tonight, I'm really excited. We're going to have our own Josh Bellamy giving a talk tonight on the Skeptic's Guide to Meditation. Hopefully you all saw his great write-up in the meetup and on the website, and he will give us I'm really looking forward to his talk. So you may take it away now. Sorry about that. I got distracted. There we go. Stop share. Take it away. And you should be able to share your screen, Josh, because I did make you a co-host, so hopefully that works okay.
Give me 2 seconds here.
Not a problem.
Apparently this is the first time I'm sharing on this laptop, and I need to do some technical things, which is unfortunately making me quit and reopen my Zoom. So I will be back in 2 seconds.
Not a problem. We can chat in the meantime. Technical stuff is always fun.
Happens, eh?
It always, I mean, I think we've all experienced technical issues for sure when doing stuff like this.
Maybe while we're waiting, I know Danita is here.
Oh,
and Danita has a new book out. Would you be willing to talk about your new book, Danita?
Well, it's actually a very old book. The poster for the reading is there. It came out 15 years ago. It's science fiction.
Oh.
And I think it gives some food for thought, because it takes place in a reconstructed rainforest, and the theme is trying to strike a balance between two ends of the spectrum. One saying the natural world is not for us, that we need to restore it and just let it be, or, you know, the natural world is ours to exploit and we can do whatever we want as long as it benefits us.
what's the name of it?
I always saw there as being a place in the middle. So that's the theme. It follows the adventures of a cast of characters that finds some some plants in this recreated forest that they weren't supposed to find, and the plot thickens after that.
What is the title of your book?
It is called Rogue Harvest.
Rogue Harvest.
Yep, they're rogues and they're harvesting because they're not supposed to be.
Perfect.
Adrian, can I grab share?
Oh yes, because I have to do that again. Thanks, Josh.
I just bought the book, and apparently I bought the last copy.
Oh,
Yay! Yep.
Have to get it signed. All right, I'm going to, or if you want to go ahead, Josh, and mute everybody, because otherwise I'll mute you too. So if you want to go ahead and do that, that would be great.
If I can find out how to do that.
You go to participants on the bottom,
Okay.
and then it says mute all at the bottom of that screen.
I'm having trouble finding it.
Oh, here comes hi. Well, I'll mute all, but you'll be muted probably, so you just have to unmute yourself. You can do that.
I think I got it now. Yep.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
Yep. Um, 2 more seconds here. You guys can hear me with a thumbs up? Cool. Okay, I think we're almost ready here. First, I'd like to give a little bit of explanation for my fancy little introductory graphic here. I'll put a disclaimer out there, first of all, that Richard Dawkins does not endorse this has no endorsement of this presentation, and possibly he has a few of his own viewpoints on it, and we'll definitely give him some airtime later on to give him a bit of his own explanation on his views of meditation. Just a brief overview of some of the things that we're going to go over. I want to first try and define meditation, and then possibly look into some of the claims of the benefits of what meditation is claimed to have offer. And then the next one after that, we'll look into some meditation styles, and then see what meditation usually comes packaged with. And then there's a few other topics after that, but we'll get into them when we arrive at them. So if you go up into Google and type meditation, you'll find it's usually refers to focusing on the mind of a particular thought or activity to train attention and awareness and achieve a mentally clear and emotional calm and stable state. Can be elusive sometimes to precisely define what meditation means. And this is usually because there's, first of all, it's an ancient tradition, and often comes packaged with a whole bunch of sorts of religion and other sorts of baggage that possibly comes along with meditation. And I guess we'll see later on of what some of those details are. But so our famous James Randi is looking skeptically of possibly some of the claims. First of all, stress reducing. One of the claims, it can reduce anxiety, depression, pain, enhance feelings of peace, perception, self-concept, and well-being. Whether these claims are actually true, hopefully I'll be able to provide some skepticism to the conversation instead of just going off of this slide to tell you what it does offer. Going into different kinds of meditation practice. The first kind listing out is body scan. I might just list these out quickly because I actually have slides after this that kind of go into the different ones. Noting practice. Zen Vipassana. Interesting fact or idea to Vipassana is oftentimes you'll probably have come across Sam Harris kind of giving his own brand of meditation that he has taken from a variety of different schools, but Vipassana, he borrows quite heavily from a specific style. Focused attention mindfulness, this is kind of what we're seeing a lot more in the West, all the way from just self-help books to kind of corporate training is kind of getting on the mindfulness bandwagon these days, and that is focused attention. Loving kindness, mantra, and transcendental meditation. So getting into noting meditation, the kind of idea with noting meditation is you kind of label experiences as they arise and come up. Say you're feeling, you're supposed to sit quietly with yourself and kind of, instead of trying to worry too much about what's going on, as you experience certain things, you just note to yourself and you can kind of possibly say that word as you're feeling it to try and make yourself, it kind of detaches yourself from getting caught up into one of these emotions. By seeing them individually, it lets you kind of move on, and in this way it can help you kind of bring a bit of quietness to your mind. And these experiences are senses that you're experiencing can be sensory, emotional, or cognitive. Body scan technique is kind of similar to the noting practice, but instead of it, you just kind of go through each part of your body, part by part, and seeing what you feel about that specific part of the body, and just taking note of the different sensations. Focused attention mindfulness. This is the one I kind of mentioned before about having a lot of renewed interest, or at least it's the most popular in the West. Attention is kind of directed towards thoughts as they pass through your mind. You're not supposed to judge these thoughts as they kind of occur or happen. You just kind of try to, from a non-judgmental, just observe your experience. Yeah. Loving kindness. This kind of meditation practice is supposed to be cultivating different feelings of well-wishing towards others, cultivating states of emotional happiness, wishing it towards yourself or others, and through this practice, you can kind of achieve these states on demand. And Sam Harris will talk, I have a few clips later on, talking a little bit about this idea and the ability to kind of cultivate some of these states as you want, and why you might want to do that, and the benefits that they have. Vipassana, as I mentioned before, is kind of Sam Harris's flavor that he borrows quite often. Sometimes there's a bit of two schools of thought in meditation. One is right now the present is all that we need to. The present is good enough, and you're not trying to get any eventual goal or transformation. But then there's other school where you are trying to, where there's a promise at the end that you are going to, if you meditate and you have moments of insight and wisdom, you'll eventually get to some higher state of being or whatever. But this is kind of the claim that some of the stuff, but it also includes Vipassana also includes concepts of looking at our personal experience and identifying ourself, or identifying the ego and the self, and kind of some of the more intricacies between our experience and what is true and what is not through self-evaluation. I think we're going to skip this slide because I didn't get that one done. So mantra and transcendental meditation, it's kind of like this is one where you repeat a phrase over and over again, and sometimes these words have specific meanings. In Sanskrit, I believe is the way, I'm probably butchering that word, but it's in some schools of meditation, the words have very specific meaning, and by repeating them, you're supposed to be concentrating on this word or giving special emphasis to it. But transcendental meditation actually is another variety of that, except I think they put a lot less emphasis on what the word actually means, and I think there's a lot more commercialization around transcendental meditation, where it's kind of like a very cashed out, or I think many different organizations push it. Anyways, moving on. Probably doesn't surprise too much with people with this information, but meditation often comes packaged with religion, metaphysical pseudoscience, kind of ideas about being able to manifest your own destiny by visualizing what you want to be, or stuff like that, and chakra energy. I kind of, in a jokingly way, made the first slide of the presentation to be as triggering as possible to my fellow skeptic out there about possible inclusions of this sort of idea, but we're not actually going to cover too much of this stuff because it's not all that interesting, and there's quite a bit more that meditation can provide, and I want to get into that. So I want to introduce the following clip. This is Sam Harris talking. He will have just led Richard Dawkins through a 5-minute guided meditation. And this is the discussion that follows that meditation session. And Sam Harris is basically dissecting Richard Dawkins' experience and seeing how he feels about it.
Josh, is it playing at your end? It's not playing at ours.
Oh.
When you shared the screen, there's a share with computer sound that you might have had to selected. You might have to go out of the share screen.
Is it playing now? Is it working now?
No.
Okay. I will reshare.
It's always fun when technical things happen, huh?
Especially when you're supposed to be a techie.
Happens to everybody. We heard the sound there.
I don't think that was me.
Oh, okay.
Showing you there's
Still not working?
kind of awareness that's
I can hear it
called
now.
mindfulness,
Okay.
right, which is just paying very close
Phew.
attention to the flow of experience.
I'll restart that now.
Now you can open your eyes. What I was showing you there is a kind of awareness that's just called mindfulness, right, which is just paying very close attention to the flow of experience. And, I have done retreats where all you do for 18 hours a day is that. You're in silence for 24 hours a day, and you're spending every waking moment trying to pay closer and closer attention to the flow of conscious experience. And I've met people who have spent 20 years like that in silence on retreat. And I've spent, in my 20s, I spent close to 2 years like that, in increments of, 1 month and 3 months.
I couldn't stand it.
Yeah. So now I want to hear about your experience. What were you experiencing here that suggested that you
I
couldn't
was
stand
listening
it?
to your words, and I was keeping my eyes shut, and I was doing everything you said. I couldn't see the point of it.
What is the experience of not seeing the point of it? You're thinking, right? You're in each of those moments, you're thinking and you're not noticing that you're thinking. So you'll think, what's the point of this?
Well, I was thinking. I was aware that I was thinking. I was aware of my thoughts. I was aware that the thoughts came into my head. I suppose I felt it. No, I mean, I wasn't. I wasn't bored. I wasn't. But I would be for 24 hours. And 5 minutes would be about my limit, I think.
All right. Well, you might need a microdose or even a macrodose.
Yes. Okay.
Well, just to give you the kind of the architecture of your doubts here, the default state for all of us is to be thinking without knowing that we're thinking. And of course, when asked, we have a kind of a vague awareness that we're thinking a lot. So you could say, yeah, I was aware I was aware that I was thinking, but I couldn't really see the point of it. The more fine-grained description of what's happening is that thoughts are continually arising and they feel like ourselves. I presume you feel like you have a self, right? You feel like you're a subject of your experience. You're in the middle of experience, right? And that's what it feels like to be identified with thought, to have a thought come up as though from behind you and seem to be you. I say something and you think, well, what does that mean? That bit of language in the mind, what does that mean? And the attitude behind it, the kind of the emotional component of it, the feeling of doubt, say, or uncertainty. The default state is to see no space around that, right? Consciousness is trimmed down to mere identity with that. And it is actually somewhat analogous to being asleep and dreaming, right? It's like, so when we're asleep and dreaming, we are totally confused about our circumstance. I mean, we're safely in our beds, but we are actually psychotically.
I go insane.
Yeah, you're completely, you're
insane.
psychotic. Yes. The only difference between being psychotic and being asleep and dreaming is that happily your motor system is suppressed and you can't get up and act out these delusions. But you are talking to people who aren't there when you're asleep and dreaming.
Or who are dead or
exactly. Yeah. So in our waking life, our default state is impressively like that in the sense that we're talking to ourselves in a way that often implies a structure, a dualistic structure to the conversation that is frankly bizarre. And there's a discursivity that we have internalized that is in many respects a conversation between the I and the me, and neither of them are there. Let's say I'm packing up to get out of here and I'll look around from my phone And I may actually internalize in the voice of my own mind, I might say, where's my phone? Now, I know I'm looking for my phone, right? Who am I talking to? So there's
Yes.
a superfluousness to much of what we say to ourselves. Now, it's not to say that there's no utility to thinking. I mean, obviously, almost everything that makes us human requires our ability to think and plan. But as you persist in the methodology I was just introducing you to, you begin to notice this kind of white noise of the automaticity of thought. And you begin to notice that consciousness is a larger space in which ultimately thoughts themselves can be recognized as they arise, as just appearances in consciousness. And then you begin to feel that there's a very different implication to thought. I mean, there can actually be no implication. So then a thought that normally would lead to anxiety, you can just see it arise and pass away. It has no more implication for your state of mind than my speaking the words
Yes.
that would produce anxiety, in me out loud to you, and you just hear them. When you're listening to me speak now, you're hearing my thoughts externalized. They don't feel like your thoughts.
No.
They're not defining your conscious states. And you could create a similar relationship to your own thoughts in a way that, first of all, gives you just at least one more degree of freedom where you can literally decide, okay, how long do I want to be angry for? Right? Something will make you angry. You'll be thinking the thoughts that seem to be encouraging anger. And then you notice this kindling of emotion based on this conversation you're having with yourself. And you can actually just decide to let go of it.
Yes, you're finally
Entirely.
coming on to, I mean, I was going to say that what I've heard you say I found philosophically interesting, but I didn't really see the point. Where did it get you? And you're now talking about where it does get you. And I sort of could imagine that. I'm not sure I could imagine spending 10 years doing it 24 hours. I mean, I wouldn't have thought it was worth it. I'd rather get on with thinking of.
So breaking down that clip, it's kind of interesting first to see that Dawkins kind of doesn't quite see the initial point in it, and it's a very uncomfortable, not uncomfortable, but definitely kind of trying to figure out what's the point or purpose of it. And I think the idea is sometimes it can be quite overlooked first time of somebody trying it to see what is the value. And you'll also have noticed Sam mentions the idea of a macro or micro dose. That is, he's talking about hallucinogenics. And that's actually an idea that another clip that I want to introduce in the next slide. And that's kind of the idea of, for the people that don't really have trouble seeing what is the purpose or why would I want to do this. I'll let Sam talk to that idea. And basically that was the slide for saying, what's the point?
Well, many people ask me about the virtues of psychedelics because I've written about this on my blog and in my book, Waking Up. And they were at a point early in my inquiry, they were indispensable. And this is an experience that's shared by many Westerners. It's hard to really recommend psychedelics without serious caveats because some of them I think are probably neurotoxic, some are really well tolerated, but still you can have very scary, destabilizing experiences on them, and so you just can't, without caveat, recommend that people drop acid or take MDMA. So it's everything I say on the subject should be understood in that context. But for some people, taking a drug is the only way they're going to notice that it's possible to have a very different experience of the world. They're sufficiently lumpen and uninquisitive about the nature of their own minds that if you tell them to meditate, if you teach them mindfulness, you tell them how to follow their breath, they will look inside for 30 seconds or 30 minutes and see nothing of interest and walk away feeling that there's no there. Either it doesn't work for them, or that everyone else must be just faking it, or there's, it requires a certain talent and a certain degree of luck, therefore, to have enough concentration to connect with any, quote, spiritual practice the first time, or even the 10th time, or even after a year of attempting it, because it's just, these practices are difficult, and the conditioning of our minds to just ceaselessly talk is deep. So, as Terence McKenna once said, psychedelics are the only method that truly guarantee an effect. And this effect can be, again, very painful. You're not necessarily going to have a good experience, but there's no question that if someone gives you 100 micrograms of acid, something is going to happen. 2 hours later, the significance of your existence will have just been borne down on you like an avalanche. And again, this can be terrifying, or it can be absolutely sublime, depending on various causes and conditions. But the one thing it cannot be is boring, and that is, you can't say that about yoga or meditation or just going into solitude or anything else that any other non-pharmacological means of inquiry. So where drugs have been indispensable for many people is in advertising the possibility of a change in consciousness. And so I don't think they're durable methods for people. That I don't think you need or should just keep taking drugs month after month, year after year as a mode of spiritual inquiry. But there's certainly a period in many people's lives at the beginning where you wouldn't even see a glimmer of reason to suspect that a radical change in the nature of your experience would be possible. My first experience with psychedelics that was important, that actually shifted my view of human possibility, was with MDMA, which I took before it became a club drug. I think this was in 1987. I took it, and no one I knew, no one of my generation had taken it. And although the drug obviously goes back many decades before that, and it had not been adopted by popular culture as a party drug. So it was coming very much out of the therapeutic community. People were doing, in a closeted way, psychotherapy with it. And I took it as a means of discovering something about the nature of my mind. It was not a social situation. I was just, a friend and I were alone, and we took it together and just had a conversation on this drug. And what was revelatory about it was that it was an experience of absolute sobriety. It was not, there was no druggy component to it. We just became clearer and clearer and clearer in our thinking and feeling. And the crucial component of this was a loss of any feeling of self-concern. I was no longer looking at myself through my friend's eyes. I was no longer worried about what he was thinking about me. I was no longer subtly correcting course based on changes I saw in how he was perceiving what I was saying. There was a whole veneer of fear, frankly, that I didn't know was there, that got stripped away. And there was just kind of naked awareness of the present moment. And what came into that void was a very clear understanding that I loved him, here I was, 18 or 19, and I was not in the habit of thinking about how much I loved the men in my life. And here's one of my best friends, and I just realized with it sounds absolutely pedestrian to say it, but I realized that I wanted him to be happy in a way that was just, it was like a lightning bolt. And what was truly revolutionary about this insight was that the feeling that came crashing down to that point was just boundless love for one of my best friends, and absolutely no egoic self-concern, no possibility for feeling envy, for feeling any kind of petty emotion that separated myself from him. But then I realized in the next moment that I would feel this way for anyone who walked through the door, that there was nothing contingent on our relationship about this feeling. It was not justified by my friendship with him. This was the way I felt for every other conscious being. So this is the way I would feel for the postman if he walked through the door. And that suddenly opened my mind to the possibility of being like Jesus, whoever he was. That these icons of traditional religion were not all epileptics and schizophrenics and frauds. These were people who, and again, we can be skeptical about any specific individual. Some of them could have been schizophrenic, some of them could have had temporal lobe epilepsy, but some people, historically, and even in the present, have borne witness to this experience where you can just quite literally lose your self-concern in a way that makes you love people unconditionally. And so, that was the experience I had on MDMA. It, frankly, blew my mind, and it took me years for me to integrate this understanding of this possibility into my intellectual life, and it prompted me to seek to have this experience in other ways. For many, many years, I spent years studying meditation in various contexts, mostly in India and Nepal. I can say you can have this experience without MDMA. MDMA isn't the only way to have it. And the truth is, virtually any experience you can have with psychedelics, you can have without psychedelics, because all psychedelics do is modulate the existing neurochemistry of the brain. They're not doing something that the brain can't do on its own. You're just playing with neurotransmitters or mimicking neurotransmitters. I have had the same experience to more or less similar degree just through meditation, but it's clear to me that I would never have suspected that such an experience was possible, but for my experimenting with MDMA in the beginning. And so I have to just acknowledge that. Again, issuing the caveat that this drug could well be bad for you. There's some evidence of its neurotoxicity, and there's also a lot of evidence that research has been heavily politicized, so you have to be cautious on both sides. But I can't advocate that we drop MDMA in the water supply and cure us of our egocentricity. There's reasons to be circumspect there.
So breaking that down, sometimes hallucinogenics can provide insights into different states of mind that are possible. Also, it's interesting when you think about it. Sometimes hallucinogenics can give us insight into the idea. We see religious folks. There are certain parts of group worship or stuff that brings on certain types of experiences. You can, through hallucinogenics, kind of feel some of those same experiences. And it's interesting to think through meditation, you can cultivate some of those same experiences on demand. I want to introduce the next part here. 1 second. So Robert Sapolsky, he's one of my latest. I'm one of his fanboys. He is an amazing author when it comes to kind of all things biology. He's currently the professor of biology, neurology, and neurological sciences at Stanford University. But he has written a book, I recently read his book on why zebras don't get ulcers, and it talks to all the reasons how stress is killing us and how the body how the body deals with stress, and sometimes how things can go wrong when we don't deal with stress accurately. I'll say this following slide that I'm about to introduce might be a bit controversial, but I think in the end it might, you'll have to see the path that I bring you down.
So when you look at the really unique, bizarre things humans have come up with, ranging from cave paintings to Snapchats and everything in between, probably the most unique and universal thing we've come up with is this religion business. When you talk about symbolic, metaphorical thinking, essentially there has been no culture on earth that has not invented some form of what could be termed meta-magical thinking, attributing things that cannot be seen, faith-based belief systems, things of that sort. It's universal. 95% of people believe in some sort of omnipotent something or other out there. Every culture out there has it. People have endlessly speculated about the evolution of religiosity. And at least in terms of westernized religions, it makes perfect sense why they've evolved, because they're wonderful mechanisms for reducing stress. It is an awful, terrifying world out there where bad things happen and we're all going to die eventually. And believing that there is something, someone responsible for it, at least gives some stress-reducing attributes built around understanding causality. If on top of that, you believe there is not only something out there responsible for all of this, but that there is a larger purpose to it, that's another level of stress-reducing explanation. If then on top of it, you believe that individual out there is benevolent, even more so, control and predictability. Benevolent and listens to human entreaties, more elements of control. Benevolent listens to human entreaties and prefers to listen to people like you, who look like you, pray like you, request like you, even more so. They're just all these levels of control, predictability, they're stress reducing. And what is infuriating to me as an utter complete atheist is a very, very solid literature showing the health benefits of religiosity. Independent of, you tend to get a social supportive community when you're religious, you have fewer lifestyle risk factors. The mere ability to perceive causality, reason, benevolence especially for people like me, if I say the right combination of words and fervently believe in it, that's wonderfully protective and there's health benefits to it. If it is a totally heartless, indifferent, apathetic universe out there, you are far more at risk for all the logical things, which is to conclude it is an utterly depressing universe out there. Rates of depression are much higher among atheists, go figure. So in terms of that, it makes perfect sense why this is something that people have come up with. And rather than asking why is it that 95% of humans come up with some form of religiosity, much more biologically interesting question to me is what's up with the 5% of atheists who don't do that?
So I just looked up a little bit of some of the research around that, and there's you can find the link in the present. I'll post up the presentation afterwards if you want any of these references. But this is a meta, kind of a meta breakdown of a bunch of different studies, and it kind of shows that over 60% report less depression, faster remission from depression in those that are more religious and spiritual. Of the 178 most methodological rigorous studies, 119 of them, or 67%, find inverse relationships between religiosity and spirituality and depression. Of course, many of the factors that influence risk of depression besides I'm gonna just call RNS now, but including genetic, developmental, and environmental factors. Second here. And this is a little bit about talking about the correlation. Is small but consistent and cannot be explained by gender, age, and ethnicity. Furthermore, the size of the effect was equivalent to the effect of gender on depression based on similar meta-analysis. Also, interestingly, studies that included subjects experiencing high levels of stress found the buffering effect of religious involvement was 50% higher. So you might be able to kind of see where I'm going a little bit here, but it's the idea of possibly with atheist skeptic community, is there possibilities that some of the way that we think about the world can, if we don't have proper stress reducing techniques, it can be harmful for us. And that's the idea of kind of where can we identifying what are the mechanisms going on here and what are secular alternatives that can help we can kind of learn from. So I want to introduce the next clip here, and this is one about Sam Harris and Dawkins again, and it's talking a little bit to this idea, and it's around the idea that there are different societies and philosophers have come across kind of some age-old nuggets of wisdom around some of these concepts, and the fact that they're usually burdened by religion and all sorts of different things. But I'll let Sam do the talking.
The mind. I mean, so for instance, like, so you were just referencing the fact that your experience of the world isn't an unmediated experience of the world. What you are experiencing a kind of user interface where everything you see, and the table you can touch, the traffic you can see outside the window, all of this is an appearance. It's quite literally a vision being produced by your brain.
Yes,
right.
quite.
So you are in your brain, you're in your mind in each moment. Stem to stern.
Exactly.
So this, you're seeing it. You're talking to me. Presumably, I exist. It's possible that you could be asleep and dreaming, and you would wake up and be surprised.
Yeah.
And even in that case, the difference between being awake and having a truthful perception of someone who actually exists versus being asleep and just dreaming and being in dialogue with a figment of your imagination, neurologically speaking, those are very similar states, right? And it's like just the state of being awake is just more constrained, as you say, by the inputs to the nervous system.
Yes.
So what you discover with psychedelics, and the truth is you can discover this with meditation as well without taking any drug, that there's an impressive range of flexibility within that space to play with the software component of your mind, which again is basically everything apart from the fact that gross inputs from the outside world will have to be accounted for, right? But you can change your experience of the world moment to moment, and perhaps most importantly, you can change your disposition to react to the world, to react to the things that you see and the things that people say, and so like kind of the emotional software you're running, you can change that to a remarkable degree and just feel very differently about existence moment to moment. So this is the difference between being neurotic and self-absorbed and narcissistic and endlessly judgmental, or being someone very, very much like Jesus, whoever he was, or Buddha, whoever he was, someone who has worked something out in terms of kind of the software level of human psychology, such that you can well make sense of how they had such a transfiguring influence on the people who came into contact with them. And then, I mean, again, this comes back to the origin of religion. Then you see, okay, here are people who are bowling people over with their degree of kind of personal freedom and philosophical wisdom, essentially, the wisdom of living a good life. And yet, because science isn't even a gleam in the eye of the smartest person, I mean, like even Archimedes doesn't have it quite at that point. All of this gets enshrined mimetically in the context of a worldview that is still talking about a personal God,
Yes.
ruling over things, or reincarnation if you're in the Eastern context. And so this perennial wisdom, which gets renewed and refreshed and occasionally rediscovered by someone like Aldous Huxley, who actually gave us the term the perennial philosophy to name this. It tends to come to us kind of thoroughly encumbered and even vitiated by Iron Age superstition and taboo. If you become interested in this range of experience, if you had taken acid in 1967 with the rest of your friends and become interested in Eastern philosophy or Western mysticism, you'd be confronted with all of the religiosity and dogmatism and speciousness of those cultural memetics. And whereas what is really needed is having a thoroughly scientific and rational 21st century conversation about the plasticity of human consciousness, of the mind. I mean, so
introducing me here, I want to get a little bit more into some of the actual science, around meditation, and what there's an excellent book I read called Altered Traits, talking both Daniel Goleman and Richard Davidson are kind of both longtime meditators. When they first got into their careers, they wanted to kind of go down and do some of this research. But at that time, definitely everyone was telling them that this was kind of career-ending moves, just because of the kind of attitudes at the time around devaluing introspection, and the idea that a lot of this isn't really considered hard science and could possibly be career-ending for them. But let's see. I think sorry. The next clip is kind of Daniel Goleman talking about going and interviewing or kind of doing fMRI studies on different long-term meditators, yogis that have kind of devoted their time or lifetime to doing meditation, and kind of what some of the actual science says. And yeah.
My co-author of the book Altered Traits is a neuroscientist, Richard Davidson. He has a lab at the University of Wisconsin. It's a very large lab. He has dedicated scanners. He has about 100 people working there. And he was able to do some remarkable research where he flew Olympic-level meditators who live in Nepal or India, typically, or some in France. He flew them over to the lab and put them through a protocol in his brain scanners and did state-of-the-art tests, and the results were just astounding. We found, for example, or he found, that their brainwaves are really different. Perhaps the most remarkable finding in the Olympic-level meditators has to do with what's called a gamma wave. All of us get gamma for a very short period when we solve a problem we've been grappling with, even if it's something that's vexed us for months. We get about a half second of gamma. It's the strongest wave in the EEG spectrum. We get it when we bite into an apple or imagine biting into an apple. And for a brief period, a split second, inputs from taste, sound, smell, vision, all of that come together in that imagined bite into the apple. But that lasts very, very short period in an ordinary EEG. What was stunning was that the Olympic-level meditators, these are people who've done up to 62,000 lifetime hours of meditation, their brainwave shows gamma very strong all the time as a lasting trait, just no matter what they're doing. It's not a state effect, it's not during their meditation alone, but it's just their everyday state of mind. We actually have no idea what that means experientially. Science has never seen it before. We also find that in these Olympic level meditators, when we ask them, for example, to do a meditation on compassion, their level of gamma jumps 700 to 800% in a few seconds. This has also never been seen by science. So we have to assume that the special state of consciousness that you see in the highest level meditators is a lot like something described in the classical meditation literature centuries ago, which is that there is a state of being which is not like our ordinary state. You know, sometimes it's called liberation, enlightenment, awake, whatever the word may be. We suspect there's really no vocabulary that captures what that might be. The people that we've talked to in this Olympic level group say it's a very spacious sense. You're wide open. You're prepared for whatever may come. We just don't know, but we do know it's quite remarkable.
So it's kind of interesting. Some of the it's the idea. One of the things in that last video is talking about the difference between state effects and trait effects, and one of them is, or what state means is when you begin to meditate, you can kind of get yourself into a certain state, and that only lasts as long as you're meditating for. But there's an interesting thing that happens over time as you begin to meditate more and accumulate more hours. It then becomes what is called a state, a trait effect, where as you go through life, you will be kind of cultivating more of the same type of experience that you can cultivate when you're meditating, except that carries through to your waking experience. So I thought that was kind of interesting around some of the science there. Kind of moving on here, I just wanted to get a little bit into one last, or a little bit about this idea. If you will have listened, I'm not sure if anybody has listened to as much of Sam, or as I'm also a fanboy of Sam, if you haven't noticed. But he's if you listen to him talk about meditation, he'll often talk about this idea of the self or the ego. And this is a kind of, as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, part of Vipassana meditation focuses a little bit on this concept of whether there's something to be glimpsed there about ourself and our ego, and whether it actually exists or not. And the next clip is going to be Sam talking about why you might want to transcend this concept of self and ego, and what the self and ego actually is.
The self, the I, that is the ridgepole of our lives, the me that is putting my pants on in the morning and making dentist appointments, et cetera, actually is an illusion.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I don't mean by that. Because we use this word self in many ways, and one way we use it is to refer to the whole person. So it means your body, it means your mind, your autobiographical memory, your emotions, everything about you. That's yourself. And so clearly I'm not saying that people don't exist. People are not illusions. And so I'm really sitting here, there's no problem talking about me as a discrete person in the world. Another way we use this term self is to refer to the feeling that we all have of being located in our heads as the subject of experience. But most of us don't feel identical to our bodies. We feel like we have bodies. We feel like we're riding around in these bodies as though we were a kind of passenger in a vehicle. And we feel behind our eyes, we feel like we exist behind our eyes in a way that we don't exist behind our knees. You know, our knees are down there. They and the rest of our bodies are property in some strange way. And we feel like we're a locus of consciousness, a subject, a thinker of thoughts, a feeler of feelings inside the head. And there's been research done on this where you ask people to judge when an object is closest to another person, and people judge an object to be closest to that person when you put it near their head as opposed to near their chest or near their toes, and they judge it closest of all when you put the object near their eyes as opposed to the back of their heads. So we feel like we're behind our eyes. We feel like other people are behind their eyes. And when you start to meditate, most people, you close your eyes and you feel like, okay, I'm up here behind my eyes, and now I'm trying to pay attention to the breath or to sensations or to the sound of a mantra or whatever your object of meditation is. And that starting point of feeling like you're the thinker of thoughts and the noticer of everything you can notice is a false view. It doesn't make sense neurologically. We know there's no place in the brain where the ego can be hiding. There's no one point where all of the processes that deliver your conscious mental life come together. All of this is distributed over almost the entirety of the brain, and all of these independent processes can be independently interrupted. So there's no one point that could be the seat of the soul, and it's disconfirmable through meditation when you look for it with sufficient rigor. You can actually look for this thing you're calling yourself and fail to find it in a way that's conclusive. You can look for the thinker of thoughts and have the sense that there's a thinker in addition to thoughts fall away. You can look for the feeling of that there's a center of experience behind your eyes and have that feeling of center drop away. And this, for lack of a better word, we can call this self-transcendence. And people experience this in a variety of ways, most of which are really haphazard. The people you hear of it very commonly in athletics, where somebody's surfing or they're doing martial arts or they're playing basketball, and for whatever reason, they have a moment where they feel there's no distance between themselves and the task. So they're not thinking about what they should be doing. They're not error correcting. They're not. If they're playing golf, they don't have thoughts in their backswing, and they're just totally at one with that moment of very often physical activity. And those moments become incredibly addictive. That's what people love about athletics, or that's a peak experience certainly for any athlete, to just feel totally at one with their sport. And the problem, however, is that to experience that in a haphazard way gives you absolutely no control over it, and it doesn't become an antidote to your unhappiness in any kind of global sense, because you're left thinking, well, then it's just a matter of surfing. I just have to get back in the water. I got to get the wetsuit on. There's no other way to feel that good. But there is, because meditation actually allows you to recognize that is a property of consciousness that's just intrinsic, that this self is a construct. The self is the feeling of being a self or an ego is what it feels like to be thinking without knowing that you're thinking. And it obviously is our default state. It's more or less everyone's default state, but it can be penetrated, and penetrating it has a variety of effects that we can talk about. But
so kind of building on that concept is interesting from kind of a skeptic's point of view of this concept of the idea that there's no self. And I think this concept can come across as being quite fuzzy and possibly even a faith claim of what do you mean there's no self? And when you're explaining this to people, especially skeptics and atheists, they might look at you funny. So this is the last clip. Sorry, this presentation has been so clip heavy, but last clip from Sam describing kind of this idea of
Before, when I asked, why should we be trying to transcend the self, you did a classic Sam Harris move where you sort of, in your soft voice, said something devastating.
What was that something?
Because it's true.
Oh.
So I was having dinner with my mom the other night, who is a scientist and a meditator and a novice meditator, and familiar with the Buddhist literature, and she was questioning this claim of whether it's true. She said essentially it's a faith claim. We don't have any, just because we can't find it when we close our eyes doesn't mean there's no self. We just don't know. What would you say to my mom? Because I had no idea what to say to my mom.
Well, this is sort of based on the premise that, which we use more or less everywhere in our intellectual lives, that what doesn't survive scrutiny can't be real. That if you keep looking at something and discover that it collapses into something else and it never collapses in the other direction, this is how we detect any visual illusion. So in my public talk on this topic, I put up a visual illusion called the Kniza square, where you have, and this is in the book actually, there are 4 partial circles which seem to frame a white square in the middle of the page. There are these 3/4 circles that articulate the corners of the square, but the connecting lines of the square don't exist. It's all just the white page. So your initial visual experience is of seeing, as clear as day, a white square in the middle of this page. But then when you look more closely, you see that there is no square there. The only thing on that page are 4 black partial circles. And so this is a classic visual illusion. And it's incredibly hard to just see the circles and not see the square, because your visual system, its edge detectors have been fooled, and they just keep detecting a square where there's no square. But if you look closely, you can see how the trick is done, and there's just no question that these circles are more real than the square. The square is merely implied, and it does not survive scrutiny. Now, so encountering a skeptic like your mom, I view this as a similar situation, albeit a more esoteric one. It's as though encountering a skeptic who would say, the square is just as real as the circles, as the partial circles. How could prove to me that it's not? In this case, on the diagram, I can actually put a finger on the non-existent edge of the square and say, well, there's no edge here, right? So we can manipulate this in interpersonal space, but and it's harder to do that in getting you to look for your head, for instance. Although that is it's a similar effort, but again, it's the same principle where you would those who put themselves in the best position to look at the thing and look hardest and look longest will converge on this discovery, which is the self you think you have can't be found, and the feeling that there is one is itself a thought, is itself an appearance in consciousness that is uninspected. And you can feel this. Well, you can see this logically, because okay, so the self that you think you have feels like something, right? It feels, if it didn't feel like something, you wouldn't think you had one, right? So it's showing up somehow. You have a feeling of self. But the sheer fact that it's showing up proves that it is among the contents of consciousness. It's an appearance, however inscrutable, in consciousness. It's a feeling of some kind. Otherwise, you wouldn't feel it.
So that kind of wraps up most of wraps things up there. Kind of I wanted to talk to at least to people, kind of resources for getting started with meditation, and with the amount of time that Sam's been in this presentation, I should be sponsored by him by now, I guess. But unfortunately, there's not too many resources for truly secular meditation stuff, but certainly Sam Harris's book, Waking Up, and the Waking Up app is an excellent way to get started. There's a 28-day course, introductory course, that are 10 minutes a day, that kind of walks you through some of these concepts. And also on there's a bunch of theory and conversation around these concepts and why you might be want to engage in this activity more. And then I'll post up this these slides, but it has some I have some resources for other stuff that you might want to check out. And that's it for my presentation. Thanks for listening. Sorry for all the clips. I'll have to work better at kind of carrying the presentation a little bit more on my own if I'd give this again in the future, but thanks.
It's all good, Josh.
Yeah, thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
And stop if you want to stop. Oh, perfect. There you go. Now I'm going to try and figure out if I can spot. I found myself right away this time. And I'm going to add, there we go, add the spotlight. So we have a couple questions here. So I'm going to just ask, the first one was Lois, way back when. She was asking a really good question, which is, are there people who just can't meditate or just shouldn't try?
Certainly, I think when it comes to different temperaments, it will obviously come a lot easier to some people than others, and that's probably the largest roadblock to that. Also, on one of Sam Harris's podcasts, he interviews somebody where he talks about there's actually a foundation of some sort set up for people who have engaged in meditation and experienced negative consequences out of the practice itself. So you just can't say meditation is good for everybody. There has been negative things to come out of that. So certainly I'd say it's not for everybody.
I can certainly, on a personal note, because I have migraine headaches, I've been told many times, take up yoga, take up meditation, take up this type of thing. And what I find happens is that my joint seize up, and this is from a young woman to now, it's even worse now that I'm much older. And I found that, that hurts, when it physically hurts, you don't want to do it anymore. But I know Lois and I were on at Imagine 7, and it was really funny because Richard Dawkins was there. And meditation was done, and he just got out of that room so fast. But I actually really enjoyed it because it was a walking meditation. So I thought, you're right, a specific kind of meditation may not fit for somebody, but finding what might work. So yeah, thank you for that. And by the way, I enjoyed all the clips. I quite like clips, so don't beat yourself up over that. So the next thing that Larry asked, how Sam prepared Dawkins for the meditation that he did with him. Do you know? I'm assuming you watched the rest of the clip.
Yeah, I was actually going to include this in the presentation, but it was getting a little bit long, I thought, already. So I was going to spare you. And also, it's funny, I think Sam Harris's take on things now is he no longer thrusts meditation sessions on his unsuspecting group of people, just because some people can have negative consequences, or it's kind of like participation isn't optional anymore. But certainly in my slides, I'll link exactly to that session for anybody that wants to check it out.
Right. Did he prepare? Was it quite a surprise for Dawkins then?
No, Sam, he definitely asked Dawkins if he wanted to participate, and he was a willing subject to it. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was a good sport in that.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. And Tracy was commenting on the higher rates of depression among atheists. And she was just like, wow, that's quite the stat. And I wasn't aware of that either.
Mhm.
And
Certainly, I'm not the best at like filtering through some of that information, and I know it is quite a substantial claim to be making that. So I encourage everybody to go through and look at that research themselves.
Yeah, what was that? That was Robert Sapolsky who made that statement, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And those, I'm going to put a plug in for our book club. We read Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, and it was a great book. It was really, really good.
He's such an amazing author, and he brings just through the text you can pull out his sense of humor, and
yes,
he has little footnotes at the bottom of the page that are amusing all on their own as well.
Yeah, it's science writing, but done well.
Yeah,
it's a non, like, I'm not a biologist, but I actually really enjoyed that book. Yeah, so that, I thought that was interesting too, the higher rates of depression, and I may have read it and that just had forgotten about it. So the next one here is, Helen said, okay, I've got to go back a little bit here. Okay, something about, meditation makes you high. That's right, Tracy was saying that. Yeah, without the drugs. I think that's basically what Sam was saying, wasn't it? That you can reach that same sort of level of.
Certainly, I'm not even sure if I'm intermediate yet meditator, but certainly some interesting states that I've experienced is I'll say I'm starting to glimpse what Sam is talking about when it comes to getting rid of the ego and kind of removing the sense that you are the center. And it's interesting, once you're able to start doing that, there's a very interesting sense of expansiveness and kind of even your body, you're not feeling your body anymore. So it's a little bit of out of body. But just to think, if you can do that in 5 or 10 minutes, just with concentrated focus, it can be quite stress reducing if certain states like that.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting. So this is also Helen. She says it also known as significant emotional response. Like, maybe Helen, if I don't get this right, you could pop in. Lois and I experienced this in a smaller way at a conference, talk by Andy Thompson, author of Why We Believe in Gods. Maybe you can express a little bit more about what you're talking about, Helen.
Sure. The emotional response was actually when he made everybody in the room during his talk hold hands and sing happy birthday. And at the end, he said, do you feel any more? I mean, everybody was smiling, laughing, giggling, and it's that significant emotional response thing.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what he was talking about. And I think that equates a lot with anything that you do outside of your own normal zone, like breathing or just sitting or, calming oneself down, perhaps is the same kind of thing, or doing something that involves people. I wish we could involve people. And you breathe more, you laugh more, and it changes your whole dynamic.
Okay, you stay here, Helen, because apparently you can't quite nail this next question either about visual illusions. How can we separate the illusions we have from belief in something?
Okay, along the same line, if you have an illusion that you are at one with God or at one with nature and doing all of this stuff, how do you separate that from, meditation works or yoga works or any of those things? I mean, just because you're doing something different, how do you qualify the difference between an illusion or emotive response to something that you've experienced to one specific thing or another specific thing?
And Josh, if you could hold off just for a second, because what she just asked is what I wrote down as my question, but it's slightly different. So maybe you can address both of them because I think they're related. And is there any evidence that meditation is better than other forms of relaxation, such as reading a book, sitting in a hot tub, doing something repetitive and soothing like knitting, one of the things I've started taking up is watching wood turning, of all things, something like that kind of thing. Is there, sort of evidence about it being better than those types of things? I think that's where Helen was sort of going as well.
I'm not sure I'm expert enough to answer some of that, but definitely in the Altered Traits book, it talks a lot about mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Right.
Is a common term that they use as a laboratory term for the method that they're doing it, and I think they're comparing this specific method to other methods and giving a little bit of statistics around that. But sorry, I don't have those offhand.
Fair answer. But it's good to know that there is a resource out there that might handle that. So thank you for that.
For the other part of the question, I'm not sure if I'll answer this right either, but it's kind of the idea of separating what you can get from one activity versus the other, and it's kind of like a bit of Occam's razor, kind of like, can you produce the same state with less? And if you can get the benefits without all the extra baggage on it, then all you need is the basics to get that same. Am I answering that right, Helen, or is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. In that, if I can calm myself down, okay, perhaps this is another question. I haven't asked it yet. I went through biofeedback. I'll share over wine sometime, but I had to go through this. And what I got from that were specific breathing systems that actually helped along the same lines as the meditation would. And that's why I'm thinking, so maybe not meditation, not yoga, not this. And as Adrian said, maybe reading or learning something new that just gives you that calm to focus in. Because I think a lot of us are having trouble with focusing. And when I had little green dots all over the house, whenever I looked at my watch, I had to do this breathing thing. So I think a lot of it revolves around just breathing, and whatever you can get to calm yourself is a good thing.
I might offer a few counters to that. Some of those ideas. One would be around the idea that Sam Harris talked a little bit about engaging in certain sports to get certain feelings where you get kind of as a bicycle rider, you're familiar.
Cycling.
Yeah. It's kind of the idea that you can achieve those states, but sometimes, certainly physical activity to achieve that state, you're getting 2 for 1 at that time. So you can't knock on that too much. But if you're adrenaline junkie and you need to do certain things, there can be some life limiting situations that you might go if you're jumping out of airplanes and stuff to get certain feelings that you might want to be able to cultivate on demand. And especially when you're in very traumatic situations, experiencing the loss of loved ones or other kind of life altering stuff, when you're distraught and you have nothing to hold on to, being able to cultivate certain states like that on demand is sometimes invaluable. So being able to practice certain techniques like that kind of do kind of help you ground yourself in that. I think I have one other thought there, but I might be losing my track of mind.
Well, that's easy to do. She also was added to that list.
Actually, it's right on that idea. Actually, it is a losing track of mind and attention. I've talked to my doctor before about possibly being ADD, and I'm borderline if I am. And I've always had problems with attention, but I'm of the sort of person that also says that might just be our society, and we're training ourselves to be constantly distracted. And when do we actually engage in activities of training attention?
Right.
And meditation is exactly that, training attention. and going through Sam Harris's 28-day course, even though subtle things, I actually noticed throughout my daytime that, hey, like I'm actually being able to stay on task more and notice when I'm being distracted. So it's kind of cool.
That's actually a really good lead in into Larry's statement / question. He says he meditated during the second year of university. Although it took away the stress, I found that I wasn't applying myself hard enough. He needed a certain amount of stress in his life to get going. So that's kind of an interesting, kind of difficult.
Meditation is working too well.
Yeah, he liked it too much. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what you have to start training yourself to be more focused on your homework as well as the meditation. Yeah.
James, my husband, always was a hard sell on meditation sometimes, because his idea of meditation is you become a boring person and you just kind of go through life in kind of a half in, half out kind of way. And if you're too aloof, that you don't get to experience life anymore. And it's actually interesting in meditation practices. There's practices of being extremely present, which is the focused attention. And there's also practices of being kind of like the noting meditation, of when you're noting sensations as they kind of go. And that's kind of the opposite, where you're good with everything that is happening, regardless of its pain or regardless of anything. And it's the idea you're training different things, and you can choose to be what you want to be in any given moment.
Right. So if you need to focus on your homework, you can do that, or whatever job, whatever it may be. So the next one, Brent's made a comment that individual intense silent prayer can be a form of meditation. I think that we would agree with that. And so Lois says, I think that it is absence of community that causes depression and not the absence of religion. Oh, that's an interesting statement. There's probably a lot to that. And Maria says, an example of mind as tourist in body is driving home and not remembering you signaled or stopped the red light, but you know you did it safely. That's a really good analogy, right? Where you get home and you don't realize how you got home. And Vincent says there's a computer game that I have that supposedly helps you to meditate. It's gotten some really good reviews. Oh, and I've got an app from a psychologist that I had that was pretty good too. So there's lots of apps out there, aren't there, and ways of helping you to learn to meditate.
Even though I only mentioned one there, like even going on to Headspace is a popular one, but even going on to their website, you can see lots of woo-woo type literature in there. So it's all over the place, but and you can gain a lot of value from these apps, but you have to kind of have your trigger warning on
right.
check sometimes.
And you're very safe doing the Sam Harris, because you know you're not going to get the religion with that.
And where as skeptics, I think in the religious realm of thought, oftentimes they only want to intermingle within themselves and they can't be exposed to other things. I think there's a certain value of being able to take even some of you might have some of these yogis that have elements of like Sam Harris would have gone and meditated with a lot of these people, and he's pulling back exactly the things that are of value.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. And so Rob just says, I have to drop off now. Thanks, Josh, for an interesting presentation. I did an 8-week course on mindfulness with no woo or no religion, and just focused on calming down, thinking slowly and clearly, and he found it useful. So that's nice that he left that message. And is this a question? I'm going to skip yours, Helen, because you've had yours answered a couple times, if that's okay. If I think of it, I'll come back to it. And maybe that was the end. I just had a little thing saying that I had 12 more messages to go, and then I got to the end. So I guess it was lying to me. So Okay, Brent says a personal experience when I was in my teens. I used to listen to a relaxation record. Yes, vinyl. That used to use the body scan method. My mom threw it out as she thought it was a form of hypnosis and a portal to demons. Wow, that's really interesting, Brent. And I think that's the last real comment. There was some more comments in there, but I was thinking because of the time, it's 8:38, we can wrap the formal part up and we can just go to talking more informally. So thank you so much, Josh. That was excellent and very interesting. And there's lots of people clapping, and I will now stop the recording and we can go